This question comes up a lot. I really want to write a book, but where do I even start? And the usual answer is just right, or some variation thereof. But I think there's a bigger question that actually needs to be answered first. What? Hey guys, it's Deborah and welcome back to my channel where we talk about the business side of self-publishing. This post came up in one of these self-publishing author communities and it got a ton of replies. The majority of the comments in here were super supportive, just start writing type of posts, which is a testament to how great and supportive all of these self-published author communities are. And everybody out there is just bombarding you with all these tactical level tips. And what's the difference between all these kinds of different editing and what about my website? You can feel all sorts of pressure to do everything professionally and invest all of this money up front. Because we all want to see self-published authors become successful and we want it to be perceived as a really valid and fulfilling career. Why are you self-publishing? And be really honest with yourself because your answer is going to drive every single other decision you make in the self-publishing process. Make every single moment that you're working on self-publishing a book enjoyable or educational. Ideally both, because if it's not one of those things, then it's not really a hobby. If you have no interest in learning about the marketing and distribution side of things, then don't. It is okay to publish and then just stop at the point of saying, yo, check this out. I am a legit author. Woo! That's some cover. Did you? Yeah. You know what you've drawn, right? You want to buy my book? Nah. As long as you know and accept the fact that this is a hobby for you and you may never see a cent of that money back, don't worry about doing a title P&L. Just set your total budget and spend it on whatever makes you happy and excited. Remember that you're doing this because you love to write and that you love learning about the process of publishing. If somebody spent 6 months doing a DIY reno of their kitchen, if I go over to the house, I'm just going to be like, wow, you redid this kitchen on your own? That is awesome. I probably wouldn't be hiring them to do a renovation of my kitchen and their interior design skills are probably not up to professional standard. That doesn't matter. We should just celebrate with them instead of nitpicking how the look and feel of their kitchen doesn't match the latest design trends. They're not trying to be a professional kitchen designer. And for that reason, I don't think we should hold somebody who has a hobbyist approach to being a self-published author to the same standards as somebody who is running a business. That's just not fair. Now, if you do actually want to make a living from self-publishing, I would advise you don't jump straight into writing. You should probably have a plan. And this is not an outliner architect versus pantsers and gardeners debate. You should have a business plan. You do not need to go full-blown 30-page business plan. I have a business background and I did not do one. All I did was have very specific answers to these 4 questions. Who my readers are, what kind of books they would buy, when I wanted my book to be published, and how much time and money I was willing to invest. That's it. Don't overcomplicate it. A couple of bullet points will do just fine. The important part is going through that thought process and getting really specific on your answers to those 4 questions. You're going to need that clarity when you've been sitting there staring at your page for 4 hours obsessing over some minor detail, because you can stop and ask questions like, would my readers care about this? If I spent X amount of time or Y amount of money, how does that fit in my budget? How many extra books am I going to have to sell in order to recoup that investment? What is this going to do to my publication timeline? Am I still going to make my launch date? And having that launch date set is so important because it is really going to help you focus on getting things done. Because blowing off working on your book because you just don't feel like it is not a luxury that you have when this is going to be your business. If none of that appeals to you because you just want to write the greatest book of all time, or you just want to write a book because you love to write, then self-publishing may not be the best path for you, because when you self-publish and you actually want your book to sell, you're going to spend so much more time on the publishing part, which leaves way less time for the writing part. And if you really hate doing all the things in the publishing part, then you might as well invest all of your time in the querying process and going down the traditionally published route. Even though self-publishing has been around for a little while now, we're still fighting the perception that self-published books are not as good as traditionally published books. Sometimes in reader forums, you see things like, how can I figure out if a book is self-published? Because I've just had a really bad experience with self-published books, and so I don't want to read any more self-published books ever again. Or that self-published authors are not real authors. But the standard of self-published books these days has really increased as you've got more and more professional self-published authors investing serious money into getting their books published. These self-published authors are putting their books through the same rigorous process that applies at any traditional publishing house. And so the only way you can really tell is by looking at this section of the product page and looking for the publisher name, and then Googling that name to see whether it's an imprint from a self-published author or an imprint from a traditional publishing house. This is a huge shift because we're also used to the traditional publishing industry as a whole acting as a gatekeeper / filter for the vast majority of books that are published. There's always been ways around it, like it didn't stop people from self-publishing their own PDF ebooks, for example. But by and large, as a reader, if you were browsing the shelves of any book retailer, you would have the expectation that whatever books you were seeing had been through this exhaustive traditional publishing process with all of the quality checks and controls that entails. But with so many new players entering the market to help self-published authors distribute their work, there's no guarantee as a reader that the book you're looking at on the shelf is going to be one that's traditionally published. And while you can sometimes tell from the cover and the blurb, you often can't tell that it hasn't been professionally published because for all intents and purposes, and to be honest, I think that's a great thing. Not all barriers to entry are equal. You've got barriers to entry that relate to competitive advantages, writing talent, marketing talent, know-how, networking, all of that kind of stuff. And then you've got what I would term mechanical or technological barriers to entry, things which have historically required publishers to invest massive amounts of cash into technology and infrastructure in order to actually publish, print, and distribute their books. KDP and Ingram Spark and other players have taken away these mechanical barriers to entry. And so it's not like self-publishing is destroying the publishing industry or the book industry or anything like that. It's just simply the playing field has been widened so that we're no longer exclusively limiting it to the pros or people who can afford to try and go professional with it. We're opening the field to anybody who's interested in publishing. And that is a great thing because your approach to publishing isn't something that is fixed. Today's hobbyist could become an entrepreneur tomorrow, and today's entrepreneur might decide to go down the artist path instead. We shouldn't hold people who have a hobbyist approach to self-publishing accountable to the same standard that we're holding professional authors to. If your friends started a band and they played every Friday night at the local pub, you wouldn't go to one of their shows and expect the same kind of standard as you would from a professional artist who is playing at the concert hall. And like any other hobby, there is no limit to how much you want to spend. It's just a matter of how much you can afford. We're going to have serious hobbyists who are putting in the same amount of time and effort and investment as somebody who is doing this as a business and producing work that is on par with somebody running a business. We're also going to have people who can't afford to do any of that and just literally want their name on the cover of a book. Both approaches are totally valid, and there are going to be businesses out there who are not producing stuff that is as good as some of the best hobbyist stuff. That's just natural for any industry. And I don't think we need to freak out about this fact because if you look back to the early days of YouTube where anybody with a smartphone that had a camera could just upload videos, that was the exact same thing where those mechanical barriers to entry to making videos just kind of disappeared overnight. And suddenly anybody and everybody could create video content that got pushed out to the world and had the same chance of being successful. And over time, audiences learn and they adjust and they begin following creators who are making content that they love. And they enjoy all sorts of content regardless of the production values. This whole thing of trying to hold hobbyists accountable to a standard that really doesn't apply to them leads to advice like you need to start a publishing company and have a good imprint name in order to appear more legitimate. That is terrible advice. Starting a company, like not just starting a business, but actually legally incorporating a company, that's got all sorts of legal and compliance costs that I would never, ever recommend to anybody who is doing this as a hobbyist. And even if you are doing this as a business, which I am, there are many reasons why you may not need to start and incorporate a company from the get-go. It also leads to people telling hobbyists that it got to spend a lot of money on an editor or a cover or this and that. And don't get me wrong, all of that advice is good, solid advice if you are doing this as a business. And if you're not, you can just feel incredibly overwhelmed and get lost and discouraged. And let's face it, even if you are doing this to make a living from self-publishing, it still feels incredibly overwhelming and you get lost and discouraged the first couple of times through. Like, we got to stop doing this. Publishing is not an easy business. It can get complicated very quickly and there are a lot of moving parts to manage. All right, now that we've answered the big question, the next step is to write. Stop worrying about things like what program you should use because it doesn't matter when you're this early in your self-publishing journey. Right now, what you need to do is start writing. You cannot become a self-published author if you do not have a book to publish. Which approach to self-publishing are you taking and have I missed any of them? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more videos like this on the business side of self-publishing. See you in the comments.